and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
The Simple Truth, rising up to explore the difficult topics of real life. Join us as we proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful with the simple truth of Jesus Christ and His Holy Catholic Church through Scripture, tradition, and the Catechism. And now, your host, Jim Havens.
It is great to be back with you on The Simple Truth, where we proclaim the life-giving reality of Jesus and His Catholic Church. We consecrate everything to the Sacred Heart of Jesus through the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the pure, strong heart of St. Joseph. It is Current Events Wednesday, and our guest today is Doug Mainwaring. He is a journalist for LifeSiteNews, LifeSiteNews.com, also an author, a marriage, family, and children's rights activist, and he has testified before the U.S. Congress and state legislative bodies, originated and co-authored amicus briefs for the United States Supreme Court, and has been a guest on numerous TV and radio programs. Doug and his family are in Washington, D.C. in the suburbs. Great blessing to have him with us today. Doug Mainwaring, thank you for being with us. How are you today?
I'm real good. Thank you, Jim, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, very excited to get to Doug's reporting today. The topic of today's show is the battle for the soul of conservatism. So Doug has done terrific and incredibly important work with an ongoing series at LifeSiteNews.com, and it's on the problematic rise of so-called LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles. We're going to look at that today. There's a lot to get to there, a lot to understand and to grapple with. And so, very important show today. But first, it's important that we always begin the Current Events Wednesday show by remembering the biggest current event of all and the number one news story that ought to be reported by all the networks but is going unreported today and every day. And that is the ongoing daily government-sanctioned, government-funded, government-protected mass murder of innocent children in the wombs of their mothers. These are real people being murdered by the thousands today and every day in our nation, which also means the mass exploitation of pregnant moms in need for profit by the lie of abortion. In terms of the loss of human life, we have at least a 9/11 every day in the U.S. Imagine 3,000 of any other category of persons being murdered in a given day in our nation, and it going unreported by the media, and even mostly ignored by the churches. And then imagine if that were happening every day, and you begin to understand something of the insane reality in which we find ourselves. According to a July 2020 article in the prestigious peer-reviewed medical journal The Lancet, we have a global death toll from abortion of more than 200,000 preborn children being murdered worldwide every day. It is essential that we put great effort into breaking through our own desensitization to this massive evil. We have to face reality on this and so much more. We must live, proclaim, and push forward the vision that every innocent human being, without exception, has a right to life. Even an atheist still ought to have the basic moral sense to see the evil of killing an innocent child. For those who believe in Jesus and His Catholic Church, we have the additional benefit of crystal clear, authoritative magisterial teaching on this, which truly gives us absolutely no place to hide in treating those in the womb as any less valuable than us. Catechism of the Catholic Church 2270, quote, "Human life must be respected and protected absolutely, from the moment of conception, meaning fertilization. From the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every innocent human being to life." End of quote. Also, if you've experienced abortion in some way as a mother, father, sibling, grandparent, etc., there are some great people, great resources available to help you in your healing process. We love you. You are not alone. Go to levelendchildkilling.com. Click on the healing tab for more information. All right, a lot there, but let's bring in Doug Mainwaring now. And Doug, as you hear that open, what jumps out to you? What would you like to begin with today?
Well, for me, it's very timely because I spent the last couple of days writing about what's been going on here in my home state, Maryland. We had 3 heinous abortion bills brought up this legislative session, and one of them you and I'm sure your listeners are probably heard about, and that is a bill that would have essentially allowed a child born alive to be aborted up to 4 weeks after being born. that once attention was drawn to it, that was withdrawn, or not officially withdrawn, but tabled. And so that could still come back to haunt us here in Maryland. There were two other bills. One was, liberals and pro-abortion folks are so scared that the current Supreme Court may overturn Roe v. Wade this session. And so, like in many states run by progressives, here in Maryland, there's a move to enshrine the right to abortion in our state constitution, and in that way protect, the right to essentially to infanticide without any chance of it being ruled or outlawed. And that one looks like it's been tabled successfully and won't be coming back to haunt us here in Maryland. But there's a third one that was passed very easily in our House of Delegates recently, and it also sailed through our Senate. And pretty soon it'll be ready to go to Governor Larry Hogan's desk for approval. And this bill is in itself quite scary. It provides $3.5 million a year to train additional abortionists. And right now, you have to have a medical license, be a doctor to perform an abortion. But if this bill becomes law, then $3.5 million per year is going to be spent on training midwives, nurse practitioners, and others to be able to perform abortions, to aid in abortions. And one thing we don't need is more abortions, and yet Democrats in Annapolis are saying, "Oh, there's the demand exceeds the need." As far as I know, Maryland already has the fourth highest abortion rate in the country, and because our laws allow for late-term abortion really up to the point of birth, we get a lot of people traveling to our states to have abortions performed. My wife and I are adoptive parents, and it was when we adopted our oldest son that I first became aware of the abortion issue. I just had never given it any thought, and lo and behold, our whole family's been built through abortion, and then years ago, before I came back to the Catholic Church, I was invited to protest and pray outside of the famous abortionist Leroy Carhart, whose office was just a few miles from our house here. And there were many times that we saw ambulances pull up to his office to take women away who were experiencing severe medical problems due to the attempted abortions, and some have even died. And so, to me, boy, this bill that's just been passed and will probably be enacted into law here in Maryland is really dangerous for women, and it's certainly dangerous for children in the womb.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Doug Mainwaring is with us, and I want to encourage folks to check out his reporting. That article that came out yesterday, Maryland Abortion Bill, a Dream Come True for the Abortion Industry. Again, you can find it at LifeSiteNews.com. And really, Doug is a name that you ought to know and be checking out his work frequently there at LifeSiteNews.com. This series that he has put together over the last several months, an ongoing series on the problematic rise of so-called LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles. Very, very important reporting. We're going to get to that in a moment, but we've got only a couple minutes before the hard break. So let's save it for a moment. And Doug, if you could just share a little bit more on your personal story, a little bit more about yourself by way of introduction, that would be great.
Sure. There's a good reason I have an interest in the rise of LGBT influence, and that is because my wife and I separated about 23, 24 years ago, and I went off to live as a gay man. And, several years passed. Then in 2008, 2009, I became politically active or engaged for the first time in my life. I just never really paid much attention to the news, certainly not about politics. But when the Tea Party began, I was really intrigued by that, and I became one of the co-founders of National Capital Tea Party Patriots. And one of the things that was attractive to me about this libertarian movement, the Tea Party, was that it wasn't involved in social issues at all. It just dealt with fiscal policy and the size of government overreach, that sort of thing. Eventually, I found myself trading my real estate license in for writing, and I began writing about the Tea Party movement for the Washington Times. And the reason I started that was because I was so tired of listening to mainstream media telling lies about what I knew was happening through the movement. So I got tired of yelling at the television set, tired of throwing the newspaper across the room, and decided to start writing. But then something amazing happened, and that was that I realized the fiscal issues that this nation faces, all of them, there's social issues that underlie them. And eventually it led me to examining my own life, renouncing being gay, and my wife and I put our marriage back together again. And that was a dozen years ago.
Praise God. Well, Doug Mainwaring is a man who knows what he's talking about, especially in this issue that we are talking about today. His important work, his ongoing series at LifeSiteNews.com on the problematic rise of so-called LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles. We're going to be right back with Doug Mainwaring, getting into the details when we come back on The Simple Truth. Stay tuned.
Hi, this is Joe McClain, host of the Catholic Drive Time Morning Show. Weekday mornings, 7 a.m. on the Station of the Cross. We'll keep you informed and inspired with insightful guests and breaking news stories of the day. That's the Catholic Drive Time. Weekday mornings, 7 a.m. on the Station of the Cross and the iCatholic radio app. We look forward to joining you on the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Praise be to Jesus. May God love you.
The Station of the Cross appreciates the generosity of our supporters. We are committed to keeping our donors' accounts up to date. If there have been changes made to your payment information, please call us so that we can update your account. 1-877-888-6279, extension 104. Or update your information online at thestationofthecross.com. Thank you for your generous support of Catholic Radio.
Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information. Bring many more people closer to our Lord by letting them know about Catholic Radio. One of the simplest ways to promote Catholic Radio is by displaying a bumper magnet on your car. Order your free bumper magnets at thestationofthecross.com. We'd be happy to send bumper magnets for your listening area so that others can come to know the Lord. That's the stationofthecross.com. Thank you for sharing Catholic Radio on the road.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here on this Current Events Wednesday. Our guest today is Doug Mainwaring. He is a journalist for LifeSiteNews, LifeSiteNews.com. And our topic today, the battle for the soul of conservatism. Really, much of what we're talking about today comes from Doug's terrific and incredibly important work with an ongoing series at LifeSiteNews.com on the problematic rise of so-called LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles. For instance, this is the second article in his series. It's entitled Painting the Elephant Rainbow, why growing LGBT influence in conservative circles must be checked. And Doug writes the following, quote, "There's a battle going on for the soul of the newly emerging conservative political coalition involving issues of enormous consequence for the future of our nation, but which remain off the radar of many engaged observers. Here's what's at stake. Will conservatives assert the immutable nature of human beings as male and female, or will that which is known by science and clearly visible in nature be tossed into the dumpster of history in favor of misguided political opportunism? Will the GOP continue to recognize the supreme importance of complementarity? Put another way, as gay, lesbian, and transgender individuals rightly stream away from the Democrat Party and find a new home under the Republican tent, the GOP must assert more clearly and boldly than ever that marriage is between one man and one woman, that there are precisely two sexes, and that nobody is born in the wrong body or born that way. These are non-negotiable for conservatives, for Christians, and for all thinking, reasoning people. Conservative elites, whether members of the political, academic, media, or corporate classes, need to once again relentlessly pursue intellectual honesty and integrity regarding creeping LGBT influence within their ranks." So great writing here from Doug Mainwaring. And Doug, as far as the details go, how do you, there are so many I know that you can choose from. You write so much about it, exposing everything that you're seeing in these articles. But as by way of summary, for the folks listening, watching now, how do you explain the problem going on here with some examples?
Yeah, well, I first started to take an interest in this topic during the 2020 presidential election. And that's because I started to notice on social media that, a lot of gay men were really supportive of President Donald Trump. And there was even a survey taken, I think in late summer of 2020, that showed that, 40% of self-identifying gay men were going to vote for President Trump. And around that same time, Rick Grinnell, a man who had served as President Trump's ambassador to Germany, and then who went on to become director of the National Intelligence Agencies, he did a video ad for President Trump it was shown just on social media, but it quickly had 5 million views. And in that video, he announced that President Trump was the first president ever to come into office fully supportive of the gay population and fully supportive of same-sex marriage, and dubbed him the most pro-LGBT president in history. And a couple months later, just a few days before Election Day in November, Melania Trump, the First Lady, also did an ad, I think it was produced by the Log Cabin Republicans, where she asserted her support for gay Republicans and her love for them and so forth, and her full embrace of gays. And so those were some, major changes in the political landscape when it came to the gay population and its relationship with and within the Republican Party. And we already know what's been going on within the Catholic Church through folks like Father James Martin and so forth. There's been heavy infiltration there through him and many other like-minded people who follow him. So that's when I really began watching what was going on. And it was pretty, generally pretty quiet about it. I was able to, interview Milo Yiannopoulos about a year ago now, and where he announced that he had walked away from his gay lifestyle, and that he was fully embracing his Catholic faith, living a chaste life, and was devoted to St. Joseph. And that's been over a year now, and he really has kept with that, and seems determined to live his life as a chaste Catholic man. And so what's happened with Milo, and what I've experienced, and what a lot of other former gay and lesbian men and women have come to, that never gets talked about. What does get talked about and praised and celebrated is any increase of influence of homosexuality, same-sex marriage, transgenderism, whatever. So, I really felt like people like me, like Milo, and like many others that I've reported on really need to have a higher profile in the Republican Party. But the opposite thing has happened. Republicans ignore us and instead focus on every little bit of additional influence, concerning homosexuality. And, that's to me, I've watched sort of some, I think they're train wrecks, where there's been big gatherings of conservative intellectuals, and they now share the stage with men who are self-identify as gay, and often who are married to a member of the same sex, and who are using surrogacy to produce children for their marriage. And what happens? Well, other Republicans, high-profile Republicans, praise them and celebrate with them and congratulate them for their marriage and congratulate them for their means of obtaining children. And to me, that is very dangerous, because it sounds to me like we've totally capitulated on the battle to maintain the immutable definition of marriage as it always has been, one man married to one woman. And I think it's tragic too for young people, especially young Catholics, witnessing this coexistence of our intellectual class, conservative Catholic intellectual class, with this rising tide of gay conservatives who are gaining higher and higher profiles, because young people, what are they going to conclude? They're going to conclude, well, there's nothing wrong with having an active homosexual life, and there's nothing wrong with marrying a member of the same sex and obtaining, really commodifying children for their relationships. So, that's kind of, the picture from 30,000 feet of how I became interested in this, Jim.
Yeah, important points here from Doug Mainwaring that he is bringing forth in his excellent reporting at LifeSiteNews.com, this series that we are talking about today. The first article in the series that you published was back in November 9th. LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles is growing. Here's why that's deeply problematic. And in that, I just want to point out this detail that you put down here, because again, just to understand what is going on, the problem is a lot bigger than maybe some people are aware of. You talk about Donald Trump hosting a huge black tie gala for log cabin Republicans at his Florida Mar-a-Lago Atlantic Resort home, where former First Lady Melania Trump was honored with the organization's Spirit of Lincoln Award. So that's pretty bad. But then you even go on to say this: earlier that day at a San Diego shipyard, the U.S. Navy launched its newest ship named after homosexual pederast Harvey Milk. The Secretary of the Navy and assorted admirals watched as a middle-aged transgender Navy veteran, a man who presents himself as a woman, christened the vessel. 2 weeks earlier, another gender-confused male was made a 4-star admiral. So this is going on throughout our military, throughout our culture, throughout our government, and as you write in this other article, the second one in the series, LGBT forces plan to sink deep roots within the GOP and transform it, mutate it, further shifting what's left of American culture toward peak sodomy and peak genderlessness, while regulating the nuclear family to a distant memory. Trust me, it's happening, you write. And along those lines, I want to bring in this example. This is an example from Dave Rubin, who is a conservative podcaster, a conservative personality. And so he is a man who's living in a so-called same-sex marriage, a so-called gay marriage. And here he is announcing, so he's on these panels, you write about some of that with Dave Rubin, and then here he is announcing a couple weeks ago that he's doing what Pete Buttigieg announced not long before that he and his so-called husband are going to be having children, and they're going to be doing it. In Dave Rubin's case, it's, I believe, one mother donating 2 eggs that are going to be artificially inseminated by both, one by Dave, the other by his so-called husband, and not just those 2 eggs, but probably about a dozen or more. And we know how this works with IVF. So there will be children that will be iced or destroyed, I guess, real living human beings at the embryonic stage. They'll take a couple of them, though, that seem to be looking good, I guess, and implant them into 2 different surrogate women who will carry these 2 different children. And this is all supposed to be just congratulations, Dave. You guys are awesome. This is wonderful. It's a big problem. Here's Dave Rubin explaining it, trying to normalize this process and do exactly what you're talking about within the GOP and conservative circles. Here it is.
Let me just back up a little bit and tell you about our sort of fertility journey. So when you have 2 men or 2 women, you're missing a piece, right? You got the sperm, or you got the egg, but you don't have a sperm and an egg, right? You don't have a womb. You got to figure out some things here. And, by the way, I know most of you guys that are watching this are now on the more conservative side of things, and I never see any real issue with conservatives anymore and gay people, and Trump was the first time president to run being, pro-gay marriage, and I think most people just kind of want to live and let live and all that. But I know this is like a little bit weird for some people to hear.
Okay, so there's a lot there that Dave says. What is your initial response as you hear it, Doug?
Well, first of all, Dave Rubin has, he started way over on the left when he started his public career. And now he does more identify as with conservatives. However, the things that he now embraces, the way he's living his life, proves him not to be a conservative. You could call him a libertarian, but he's not conservative. A conservative man is going to protect women and protect children. And, if he and his, quote, husband are going to end up throwing several of their embryos in the trash can, that's not protecting children. It's the worst kind of using other human beings. So,
yeah, very very helpful commentary there from Doug Mainwaring, and he is with us to share more when we get back. LifeSiteNews.com is where you can find his reporting, but very very important what he's saying. That distinction that he makes right there, saying, look, if that's what he believes, then he's not a conservative, he's a libertarian. We need to understand these different categories. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned.
This is Life News Radio. I'm Jim Anderson. March 31st is the anniversary of the death of Terri Schiavo in 2005. Her story at lifenews.com, told by her brother Bobby Schindler, is a good lament and a must-read for those unaware of her tragic death. Abortion opponents in Congress say Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson's judicial record on matters like child abuse cases was kept from abortion opponents in Congress, but released to abortion advocates. Conceding defeat in federal district court in Portland, Oregon has thrown the doors open to non-residents and create Oregon suicide tourism. Assisted suicide groups challenged the state's residency requirements in federal court, and despite observers saying their case could be won, Oregon dropped enforcement of its assisted suicide law's residency requirement. This is Life News Radio. A culture of life has a rarely mentioned but very formidable enemy. Pornography is material that deceives its consumers into thinking that they possess beauty, while the reality is they are possessed by a lie. The first step may be to talk openly with your pastor or confessor, reject the lie, and recognize that a culture of life relies upon you.
In other headlines, the World Health Organization is calling for decriminalization of abortion and an end to conscience rights for medical workers. The on-again, off-again rhetoric surrounding do-it-yourself abortion continues. A Planned Parenthood official, while opposing Idaho's new ban on most abortions, warns of an increase in abortion pills that she admits are dangerous enough to cause infertility. And the BBC is telling stories of ongoing abortion and infanticide in North Korea. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest today, Doug Mainwaring. He is a journalist for LifeSiteNews, LifeSiteNews.com, talking a lot today about Doug's recent reporting for our topic today, the battle for the soul of conservatism, the way that Doug puts it in his reporting. It's an ongoing series that he's doing. You can find it at LifeSiteNews.com on the problematic rise of so-called LGBT influence in conservative and GOP circles. We were just talking about Dave Rubin before the break as an example. Now, he's one who presents himself as a conservative and is a big mover and shaker within conservative circles now. But Doug is right. He really ought not be called a conservative. He really is pretending to be one. But it comes down to what is conservatism? What is the core of conservatism? And do we accept as conservatives, as political conservatives, would we say that the core can still be intact while you're accepting the evil of homosexuality, the farce of so-called same-sex marriage, what's going on here with the surrogacy nonsense and all of this? And here's an interesting thing here, and I think, Doug, your reporting on this is so good because you point out that the folks that are doing this from within and being accepted in these conservative circles, they're kind of infiltrating them with all of this stuff. What's happening is that they are very much all united in being against transgenderism, so they can see the lie and the farce that is transgenderism, but then they can't apply that same logic to the lie and the farce that is so-called same-sex marriage. So that would be a question, I think, for Dave Rubin. Imagine a really nice transgender couple, Dave, really nice folks. If they were doing this, if they were saying that they're in a marriage and having children together through this surrogacy, would you agree that that would be a good thing? Or if there was a couple that was three men that were saying that they were married somehow and they were doing this surrogacy thing and they seemed really nice, would that just be congratulations to them? Would he have a problem with that? And if he would, then why wouldn't he have a problem with what he is doing? Any thoughts on this, Doug?
Yeah, absolutely. With the, Dave Rubin really caught my attention with his appearance at the National Conservatism Conference in Orlando last November, I guess it was. And, he was on stage with another gay man, Douglas Murray from England, and two other of our leading conservative thinkers. One is Yoram Hazani, who really was a sponsor of the conference, and Sohrab Ahmari, who used to be editor of the New York Post and now serves in other capacities. And I think he also does some work at the Franciscan University up in Steubenville. But here's the thing, the four of them were in a panel discussion, and the ground rules had been set that even though two of the men there were gay in homosexual relationships, one of them married to another man, the issue never came up. They were never confronted. The silence meant that it was treated as just a normal thing. And but the one thing that they could agree on was the absurdity of what's going on with transgenderism right now. The gay guys on stage agreed with the other conservative men, and I assume everybody else in that room. But here's the thing, that 10 years ago, same-sex marriage was equally as absurd as transgenderism, as men and women try to live fully as a member of the opposite sex, and expecting everybody, around them to go along with it and with the pretension. And so, how long will that agreement to focus on transgenderism as the boogeyman continue as we grow with the acceptance of same-sex marriage? And here's the thing, I don't know how much longer the Republican Party will actually treat transgenderism as the boogeyman that unites all of us. I don't know if you reported on this a few weeks ago, but the head of CPAC, Matt Schlapp, congratulated what's his name? He calls himself, I think, Leah Thompson, who's the man who identifies as a woman who's been winning NCAA swimming championships. He congratulated her, he used that pronoun, for her courage. And this is the head of CPAC. And so, he later tried to backtrack, but it was a revelation. It was a gaffe that was really some truth-telling. It shows where elites in Washington are headed with that issue as well.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. And at the same time, there was more related to Matt Schlapp that we also did report on here, which was there was video of Matt Schlapp admitting that he shut down attempts to have a pro-life panel at CPAC this year. And he had a ridiculous excuse saying, well, everything we do is pro-life. We're all pro-life and everything. And so therefore, we don't need a pro-life panel. It's absolutely absurd. In fact, the survey from CPAC this year tells you all you need to know. In the straw poll from CPAC, from the following list of issue areas, it read, please indicate the top 3 that are most important to you. And coming in at 9 was pro-life issues. Only 14.5% of the attendees of CPAC even put pro-life issues in their top 3 issues. So obviously there's a big problem there. They ought to have a whole lot of pro-life panels helping to educate people at CPAC, not have none and say, oh, well, everything we do is pro-life. The data does not bear that out. Matt Schlapp also, I want to, I'm going to save this clip of Matt Schlapp. We're going to bring this back in a moment. But he did in an interview just recently with Michael Voris, he backtracked from that tweet saying that, I forget the wording he used, but it was a kind of a ridiculous backtracking, just saying, I kind of used the wrong terms there or something. But he also made a bit of a, we'll play the clip in just a minute and we'll see what he did in that clip. I want to get your take on it. But before we go there, I do want to ask you about that panel that you were just talking about, just by way of example. If you were in charge of CPAC, for instance, or this other conservative conference, number one, would you be inviting such panelists onto the panel? If not, what would you tell them? And if you were maybe just a panelist, like the one you were just talking about, who was on the panel with them, so it wasn't your choice to book the panel, but you find yourself a panelist there with them, what would you say at that point? Like, how would you handle this situation in a way that you can sort of model for us so we can sort of understand the right way to handle these things?
Well, that's a good question, and I haven't prepared any thoughts on that. But I know from my own experience that, being gay, identifying as homosexual, is not something that has to, totally overwhelm a person's life. Back before the Supreme Court was considering the Obergefell case back in 2015, I originated and co-authored a brief for the Supreme Court called, and it was, later became known as Same-Sex Attracted Men and Their Wives. And there were 12 of us. We found 11 other guys who were willing, with their wives, to talk about how they chose not to live as gay despite their same-sex attraction, and instead have had wonderful lives married to a member of the opposite sex. And let me tell you, some of those guys had 8, 10, or 12 kids, so they've had and love their families and would do nothing to jeopardize their family's happiness. And in the same way, hopefully, straight men would not, engage in affairs or whatever with other women. These guys had, lived their lives with where same-sex attraction didn't hold power over them. And so we wanted to present an opposite side of the story, because everybody on the other side of the battle was arguing that gay men can't live fulfilled lives if they're denied the right to marriage. And in our brief to the Supreme Court, what we said was, look, marriage, the immutable definition of marriage is a beacon to all people. And what Justice Kennedy wrote in his not summation, but the decision for the majority, he said that, this is the only way that gay men and lesbians can find happiness and fulfillment. And our lives were proof that wasn't true. And that, marriage, as it's always been, is far more fulfilling. And I have to tell you, look at what Dave Rubin's doing in his quest to have children. Two men can't have children. Their sexual lives are totally sterile. And here's something else too that shows the inferiority of homosexual relationships, and that is that the trend now is for two gay men who want to have children, they have to have 2 at a time. The Buttigieg's did that. Dave Rubin and his, quote, husband are doing that, and there's been others in the news recently as well. And it's a recognition that each man wants to have a connection with his own child. It's also a recognition that the two can't come together and love one child equally, and there's a fear that the child will prefer one dad to the other. You don't have that kind of fear with a man and a woman share, parents of children they produce, because the man will love and have his own kind of relationship with that child, and the wife, the mother, will have hers. And so, I'm in the middle of writing about that right now, but I think that's a really important thing to point out. And that also, when their relationship inevitably splits up, and it will some years down the road, each man takes his own child with him. And it's like an insurance policy against future litigation. And people will say, well, Doug, you're making a lot of assumptions there and assertions, but I'm right. That's what's going on. And the fact that all these gay couples are having children in pairs, in twos, it's not a good thing. It's sort of an admission that gay marriages are so far inferior to marriage as it truly is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're coming up on the hard break in just about a minute, but we'll have the Matt Schlapp clip on the other side of that, and we're not going to be able to get to a couple other clips we were thinking about bringing up, but I'll just bring them to your attention now by way of topic, and that is this Florida parental rights bill banning teachers from discussing sex and so-called gender identity in grades K through 3. That would seem awfully sensible. But the progressive, the Democrats, this ideology, this moral relativism ideology, certainly steeped in the Democrat Party, they do not like this. They want full indoctrination of our children through the public government schools. And they would even love to have it through the private schools, or even find a way to get homeschooling children away from their parents if they could. And Disney is involved in this. So you see this corporate this corporate totalitarianism getting involved as well. The corporate president, Carrie Burke, being caught on a video talking about how, let's get more of these LGBT characters so we can normalize this to the children through Disney. So Disney's been a mess for a long time, but it's getting so clear to the surface what they are doing and what their ideology is. And it all goes back to one of the best examples that points this out to me is going back about a year ago now. I think it was the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus, where they put out that song saying, "We're coming for your children." And the point being, we're going to indoctrinate your children. And whether it's through corporations, whether it's through the schools, whether it's through the government, even through the Republican Party, and now even through conservatism, they are going to bring this ideology everywhere they can. We're going to talk about it when we get back. Stay tuned.
At the Station of the Cross, we are blessed by the variety of donations our listeners generously contribute for our evangelization efforts, from planned gifts to employer matches. We even receive donations through transfers of stock. Please consider giving a gift of stock to help us continue sharing the love of God with our hurting world. If you are being called by God to donate through a transfer of stock from your brokerage account to ours, please ask your broker to contact us at 1-877-888-6279. Your broker will need to indicate the number of shares being transferred as well as the QSIP number of those shares. That's 1-877-888-6279. Thank you for considering a gift of stock to the Station of the Cross so that we can continue proclaiming the fullness of truth with clarity and charity.
What you're offering and giving to me, you deserve to get back because you're offering more than I can give.
I learned so much through the Station on the Cross. I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it.
I was attending the chapel and places like that, and through your programs, I was able to find out how other Protestants had come back into the Catholic Church. God bless the Station of the Cross.
Donate today at thestationofthecross.com.
This is Jesse Romero, host of Jesus 911, heard weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined each day by a variety of co-hosts like Ruben Nava, Paul Clay, Dan Schneider, and my amazing wife, Anita Romero. We tackle Catholic devotions, spiritual warfare, family life, saving America, and everything in between. Join us each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Jesus 911. You can also catch a bonus encore Saturdays at noon Eastern. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Welcome back to The Simple Truth. Jim Havens here with our guest Doug Mainwaring today. He's a journalist for LifeSiteNews. Check out his great reporting at LifeSiteNews.com. Let's go to the Matt Schlapp clip now. This is Matt Schlapp. He is chairman of the American Conservative Union, which organizes CPAC. And here he is with Michael Voris not long ago, maybe a week or so ago. And this is about a 1-minute clip where Michael Voris really puts him on the spot. Listen to how Matt Schlapp tries to handle it. Here it is.
Yes or no? Should gay men be allowed to adopt young boys?
Oh boy, you know, I don't even know what does our church fight those positions, and I don't know what the policy position is of the church.
Well, the first if you call it policy, the teaching of the church is the two men shouldn't be together to begin with.
Yeah, I know what the church teaches in terms of sexual ethics.
Right.
But I don't know what it teaches in terms. I don't know what it lobbies for in these legislative chambers. I would say this, obviously. It is, we've gotten to this position where we've gotten away from this idea that having a father or mother is awfully important. And that's obviously what is preferred for kids when they're being raised.
I mean, do you consider two gay men who have children, whether they've gotten them through IVF or rent-a-womb or whatever it is, do you consider that a family?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
All right, Doug Mainwaring, what are your thoughts as you hear those answers from Matt Schlapp there?
Yeah, well, God bless Michael Voris for that. That's the first time I've heard that. I've been away from work for a couple weeks here. But, Matt Schlapp and CPAC and the National Conservatism Conference and lots of others. What they're doing is making carve-outs for gay men and gay couples and so forth. And what they're doing is they were agreeing not to address any of those issues and not to criticize those issues. But, listening to Matt Schlapp just now, by carving out a space in this way for active homosexuals and couples within conservatism, you've got to carve out marriage. You've got to do that. You've got to carve out the nuclear family. You've got to carve out every kid's absolute right to have a mother and a father. And so what Schlapp, his lame answer that he tried to toss out there, I thought was just horrendous. But he probably represents many in that class, that sort of elite class of thinker and politician here in Washington and around the country.
How would you encourage us if we were put on the spot in such a way, maybe we've not thought about it before? What is the right way to speak to that? How do we answer that question? I think it's quite clear from the church's teaching and from not the necessarily the lobbying efforts of the Catholic Church. I'm not sure if they are doing any lobbying efforts except to protect their own adoption agencies, I think, from any sort of adoption to homosexual couples. But I think, we ought to answer it very clearly along those lines, I suppose. Any wisdom to add to that for us? But also, if we're asked, look at these two nice men in this so-called homosexual marriage, aren't they a family with their children now? The child has done nothing wrong. Aren't they a family? Can't we call them a family? How would you answer that?
Yeah, well, people are really afraid of this topic, and the sort of gay movement over the last couple decades have really taken advantage of that. People, they don't like confrontation, they don't like contention, they don't want to offend anybody, and they want the peace. But these are important topics. We're talking about defending absolute truths, and truths which are, if we cast them into the dustbin of history, are going to represent the unraveling of society. And we've seen that happen, and it's happening now. Same-sex marriage, when it was introduced, when the Supreme Court ruled on it in 2015, it was just going to be so that gays could live freely and go about their own lives. But what happened immediately after that? The door to transgenderism was opened. And look what's happened in just the 6.5 years since the Obergefell decision with transgenderism. Look at the rise of young people, girls especially in middle school, high school, college, who all of a sudden don't even know that they're women anymore, and that they think their lives need to be made more interesting, more excited, and they'll be happier if they somehow migrate to becoming a male through surgery and medication and socially. And lives are being destroyed. Lives are being ruined. Young bodies are being ruined, and you have doctors performing, terrible, sort of monstrous operations, lopping off genitalia and forming synthetic new genitalia. So that's one thing. There are gays in my own family, and and so I've been writing about this topic, this whole range of topics, for years now. And you know what? I'm not afraid to talk about it, and and my own family members who are living as active homosexuals or lesbians are able to engage, and we talk about things, and occasionally there's some movement. I remember gosh, a few years ago, my son, who was living as a gay man up in New York City, called me in the middle of the night on his birthday, and he said, "Dad, I and some of my friends," and they were all gay, decided to read some of the things you've been writing about because we thought we'd get a laugh out of it, and we thought we'd also get really angry by reading the stuff, because they had, the headlines for the articles were, "I'm gay and I'm opposed to same-sex marriage," and along those lines. But what was interesting is, when he called in the middle of the night, he said, "You know what? We're angry, as we thought we would be, but for a different reason. We're angry because everybody here agrees with what you've written, that kids need both a mom and a dad." And that was the last thing I expected to hear at 2 a.m. that night. But I didn't need to back down. We could talk about it, and that was there was some movement there somewhere. Also, I learned early on in being in panel discussions talking about same-sex marriage back in the early teens. A young man came to me afterwards and said, "Look, I have lots of gay friends. They're fine. They date. Some hope to get married and have kids. What's wrong with that?" And I looked at him and I thought, I said to him, "Did your parents divorce? Are you a child of divorce?" And he said, "Yeah." And, I knew I had a 50-50 chance nowadays of him answering that in the affirmative. But ultimately I said, "Look, did you live with your mom?" He said, "Yeah." Did you get to see your dad as much as you wanted to? And he said, "No." "Did you feel separated for him and deprived of him?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, well, the same thing's going to be true for children in every gay marriage, because either mom will be missing or dad will be missing. Why would those kids be different than you and what you experienced? So, you could see that he understood. I don't know if he ultimately changed his mind, but there are things that you can say to deal with this in a non-fearful manner.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Doug Mainwaring, thank you so much for coming on with us. Thank you for all of your great reporting at LifeSiteNews.com. Keep up the great work. We're going to be paying attention and continuing to try to raise awareness and form ourselves in the truth, especially in these difficult topics. And again, Doug, thank you so much for being with us today.